Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to view House of the Dead from 2003. So in all honesty, when I was to look through the cast list of this movie, because I'm like, okay, like I remember this character, I know who this person is, I went on to see, like, Erica Durance was in this movie. And of course, Erica was also in Smallville in the later seasons as Lois Lane. So I was like, okay, like, I want to see, like, what Erica does in this movie. And come to find out, I was to see a little bit more of Erica than I thought I was going to. But either way, like, I liked her performance. Like, when she was actually on screen, it seemed that the movie was, like, improving. And so, because we had, like, another, like, in the beginning of this movie, we had, like, a whole boat sequence that was kind of like, okay, that's kind of boring. But, like, mixing Erica's character in seemed like, okay, it seems like we're going somewhere. It seems like they're going to give us zombies early. And so it's like, okay, that's good. So you can obviously tell that this movie was adapted throughout this entire film from a video game, as they consistently had to go on and display that throughout the whole entire film. It feels like this movie just really needed to get to some marker of time, and so they kept using a ton of extra things to eat up time that they didn't have. There's one obvious sequence when we get to the character Rudy, and they end up kind of zooming in on his face, and he's just like, oh, like he's in such defeat, because at one point there's a moment between Rudy and Liberty, let's just say, and as soon as we have that, all of a sudden we have, like, Rudy's life, like, flash before his eyes, and we have a massive just number of just flashing, like, sequences throughout this whole entire film to be with Rudy. And I'm like, holy crap, like, why did we have to have that whole scene? I was like, man, like, that is just really, like, going on to say, like, man, not only are you doing this, like, huge flashing sequence, but then you're also doing this, like, this turnaround, like, sequence too, when you're doing that hefty amounts of time in this film. So I'm like, because you would go on and have a person who's just standing there, and then the camera would spin around 360 around them, and I'm just like, man, like, they're doing a lot of that too. I'm like, good grief. Like, I get that they're trying to be like the video game, and there were certain times where you could tell when somebody died, they'd have, like, them do, like, 360, and then they'd be in red telling you that they're dead now. And I was like, okay, like, there's some, like, game ideas that I guess they had here. Huzzah for that. But, like, I thought there was a lot of just goofy choices here. But other than that, I kind of liked the character, like, Liberty. Like, she, of course, was to kind of give us, like, these kind of Matrix moves, and, like, there were some cool things going on with that character, even though there could be also, like, some things that it's like, okay, like, there's some stereotypical, like, characters here, but, I don't know, I had fun with this movie, even though, in all honesty, I could not go on and say altogether that this movie is a good film, but I could say that it's one of those, like, bad, good, like, bad, okay. Like, it kind of blends into, like, it's so goofy and so weird that there's just something so unique about it. And, like, the performances win me over, for the most part of this film. I've seen worse zombie movies and shows, and so, like, I can applaud this movie for what it tries to do. And, like, I at least would say that this movie doesn't feel simple. And so, yeah, so, like, I like what it tries to do. And so, with that said, And plus, also, it gives us a little skin in kind of the early stages of this film. Plus, it seems like the female characters are really great looking. I wonder why, but yeah, but you know, like I like all the female characters. They all are to be really cool. Um, Even much more so than the guy characters. So with that said, let's go on and like it's this movie is thumbs up. It's an odd thumbs up, but still. So yeah, so teeing it up, what is this movie about? So, come to find out, we have a bunch of characters that are trying to go to a rave, I guess, is on some island. And so, we have people trying to go on and find some boat to get to this island. And it seems that these characters are to miss the last ferry making it to this island. So we have these guys who go on and pay these two sailors to bring them across to this island. And so we have Kirk and Salish that are to consistently trying to take these characters, take advantage of them, and keep asking them like, well, hey, pay me this, pay me that, and so on and so forth. So these guys go and pay them whatever they need to get them to go to wherever they need to go. So we have a detective or an officer, whichever, named Casper, who is to be this kind of border patrol, and she is to be interested in what freight, of course, that Kirk is to be wielding upon his ship. So Kirk skedaddles out of there and is to make it onto the island. We, of course, end up getting, in the early stages of this movie, some skin, and, of course, from the female side of things. But then we, of course, go on to, at some point, have these characters get onto the island. They start to, at some point, meet up with the people that have already been at the rave, and they are to go on and tell the people who had made it from this boat. It's like, well, hey, like, you guys made a big mistake coming here because zombies had gone on and attacked us. And so we then have these characters trying to figure out a way to either get out of here or figure out a way to try and survive. Either way. So that leads them further and further through this unusual home that is to be by this rave. So they find these like kind of secret rooms and these secret areas, and that leads them further throughout this whole entire home, even to this unusual underground like basement of sorts that kind of leads them to possibly a way out of here. So by the end of this movie, like, it kind of ends like how, of course, one of like the Resident Evil or video games do, where by the end of this we have like two people left, and we have this special agent who's like, yeah, like, we're here, and and we're gonna go on, and we're gonna find all these zombies, and we're gonna take care of business. And so, yeah, so by the end of this movie, you can go on and you can probably easily figure out who's going to be the last two standing. But there was so much about this movie also where, like, it does kind of come unbelievable, where it's like, wait a minute, like, how is it that this person is still alive? How is it that this character is to have not been bitten and turned already? Like, what's going on with all of these characters? But you just have to suspend disbelief. And plus, also, you have a number of characters that are probably to be like, well, like, they really had to, like, crunch the numbers and just be like, okay, we're gonna keep this person here for him to go off on this scene, and we're going to keep this person here so that way they can go on and do that. And like there was a whole like math problem that came to this movie to like give everybody this really good send off. And so yeah, so that kind of played into the film. So with that said, let's go on and let's get into the spoilers of this film. Let's go more in depth, because it's about that time to say that it's about that time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get into spoil this movie. So we go on and have this movie being narrated by Rudy, and so they talk about both Greg and Simon, who are to be Rudy's friends, that will meet him at some point on this Rave Island. So these guys, of course, had missed their last ferry to make it to the island, and you thought that these guys should have gone on and given up, and they would have stayed alive after this, but no, they were to go on to just find some other boat and pay them off. So we have Rudy and a number of characters that, of course, are to be at this rave. And before zombie things start to kick off, we have at one point where Jonah, who of course be played by Erica Durance, goes on to have a boyfriend, I believe, Matt. And so they go off together, and we have Jonah, who is to, of course, maybe be a little tipsy, maybe being a little drunk, and realizing that there's a thing of water here. It's like, well, hey, how about we go on and we just go swimming? So Jonah, it seems, is taking off her tops and most of her swimwear here, and going, or most of her wares, her clothing. And so Jonah, it seems, to be going in the water, and we weirdly have her boyfriend that chickens out because it's like, oh no, it's far too cold. Like, you have a woman that goes out there and she's wearing next to nothing, almost, and Matt is saying that it's far too cold. I call bullshit. If you see a woman like Erica Durance going into the water, you go after. You go after. Regardless of how cold it is. I don't care. So, but it kind of lines up for the movie to where finally when Jonah makes her way back after kind of swimming for a long period of time, realizing that Matt is bizarrely gone, Jonah starts to look after or try to find where Matt is, and that leads her to go into a location where she comes to find out that Matt had gone on and been killed by a zombie, like a fist through the body. And so Jonah is now suffer that same fate, sadly. It's like, oh no, she couldn't have been through the whole stretch of the film. Kind of seems disappointing, but hey, you gotta kill somebody off in the beginning of this movie. So now back on the boat, trying to make their way to this rave. So we have Simon and Greg, who are wow, I luckily realized what their names were. We have Simon and Greg, who is to pay off both Kirk and Salish. And Salish is going, no man, like I don't want to go on that island. That's the island of the dead, or whatever. Like there's a whole history about that island. Nah. And so it's like, dude, you could have just dropped them off, and like you don't have to stick around. You could have just left them there. I'm sure they could have figured out a way to get back. So Kirk is to go on and want a decent payout, but that also leads them to have this border patrol via Casper, these detectives, these officers that are wearing these badges and whatever, wanting to go on and have somehow, somewhere, a like megaphone, or like how is it that she's going on and even doing that like really loud voice to where Kirk can even hear her? I don't know how. So because it doesn't really show in the movie. So Casper is calling out to Kirk, telling him that she wants him to stop what he's doing because she wants to board his vessel to see what cargo he has. So Kirk is to want to get another payout from Greg so that way they can get going, and so they do. So at some point it seems that Casper is to find a boat of some sort to get her way to that island, but it seems she is to lose her officer while getting to the island. And at some point she's going to meet up with him and shoot him in the head. Funny enough, I guess we don't really understand for these characters if they're supposed to shoot them in the head or the heart, because it just seems like they're just randomly shooting whatever. I guess kind of close to being the video game, where you, of course, would just kind of shoot them wherever and hope for the best. So Kirk drives off, and we have Greg, who is consistently seasick, and he's ralphing up his lunch to the point of Simon just mentioning to Greg, it's like, well, hey man, hey, here's another beer. Like, it'll probably like settle your stomach. And Greg, of course, ends up getting sick yet again, to the point of him barfing on his girl named Cynthia. And so Cynthia now goes on to like find this sink where she's to try to like clean her clothing, and all of a sudden Salish just barges in with his cross, like, hey, this will protect you. And Cynthia's like, hey, like, you want a picture? Like, it'll last longer? Because, of course, like, this girl is to not have a top on. So we have Salish trying to give her this medallion to hope that it will protect her from zombies. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out. I don't think that's going to pan out there, bro. So we go on, and they make it to the island. We have Kirk, who is consistently like dropping off all of his cargo. So he's like, yeah, like any of this illegal stuff will just drop here on this boat, or off the boat to the island. And so like any of this stuff that's illegal, Casper and them won't find out about it. So we then have our characters that make it onto the island, and we immediately have like some of them start to separate, because some of them are like at the rave stage, kind of waiting for like somebody to come and like, hey, where's the party? Where's the party at? So the group ends up, like, half of the group ends up going on to make their way to just find if there's anybody else nearby. And we have Greg and Cynthia that go off to, like, at first they're just gonna like throw down right on the stage and just start like getting hot and heavy. And Cynthia's like, no, I think like if somebody else shows up, I think we should like get something more private. And Greg is like, oh yeah, let's go on. So Greg then goes into the tent and is to see that there is some God, what is it? The Velcro. And so he's like, yeah, let's get to this. But then all of a sudden, Greg is to pull away because he's like, wait a minute, like, I have to pee. Sorry, hun. I had all this beer in me, and I gotta just pour it out, if you know what I mean. So Greg goes off, and come to find out, Cynthia won't be alone in this tent for long, as she ends up getting surrounded by zombies, and she becomes one herself. Dracula, dead and loving it. She becomes one herself. I love that movie. It's funny. So, come to find out, we'll find Greg is stuck in this porta potty, and I thought that moment was funny because he's covered in crap. But, like, I hate the fact that we end up having a character being showcased like that, because it's just a butt of a joke. Or in this case, a number 2 of the joke. But anyways, so we have, I believe, like Simon, Karma, and Alicia, who make their way into this home to find Rudy, Liberty, and like I want to state that there's probably Hugh. And so these characters go on and tell them that, like, hey, there's a zombie outbreak out there. Here's some camcorder footage with evidence, which we barely get to see. I think if they would have wanted to really eat up time, the camcorder thing should have been the one thing that could have ate up a lot of time if they zoomed into that and really showcased that whole event. I would have been like, yeah, let's showcase all of that carnage, because that would have been freaking awesome. So we have Salish and we have Kurt who are back on the boat, and we have them at some point going on and either like fending off some zombies, end up firing away. We have Kirk who's consistently like popping them in the chest, and these zombies just consistently ploop ploop into the water, and then they end up coming back up. Again, Creature of the Black Lagoon. I was like, yeah, this is cool. How they're really like taking the time to get these zombies like out of the water. That was like so cool, even though it's like an easy thing, but still to try to do. Anyways, so we go on and also like come to find out there's a whole backstory about this island at some point that I'm not quite sure exactly where it is, so I'm just gonna just plop it down right here. So, come to find out there was a guy named Castillo, who was to have gone on and been involved in some pirate ship. And we have this captain that goes on and speak with Callisto, or Callisto? That doesn't sound right. Castillo, a goofy name. And so they're talking back and forth, and so this guy's mentioned, like, even in death, like, he won't be stopped, and so on and so forth. So what ends up happening is that Castillo, good God. I want to say Callisto because it's a lot easier to say. We have this guy that goes on and chokes the captain and kills him off. Come to find out, like, the captain guy ends up going on and being in the, like, the Day of the Dead show that, of course, is on Sci-Fi. And I was like, oh my god, like, that's the guy from Day of the Dead. That show that, to me, wasn't that good. But still, like, maybe he used this kind of resume of like, hey, I was in House of the Dead. I wasn't like killing any zombies, but I was still in that film. Because like certain people have to go on and like use a resume thing to say it's like, well, hey, I was in a zombie movie once, so hey, like, could I get work because I was in a zombie movie? What part were you in? Oh yeah, the part where I died quickly. You could see me in the back. Yeah. Anyways, so. Or maybe they hired him because he was in that movie. Who knows? Anyways, moving on. So, we find out that these guys have a boat. And they're like, yeah, like, let's try and get out of here by getting to the boat. So, everybody goes on and makes their way to the boat. And so, we have a lot of characters, like, and Simon's just thinking, like, oh, like, I'll just jump into the water and just swim to the boat and try to signal Kurt to, like, hey, let's get over to the nearest shore so we can just kind of get all on this boat. But then all of a sudden we have this cool thing where all these, like, zombies are coming out of the water attacking Simon, and then he's like, oh, crap, so he's trying to swim back. We have Liberty that goes on and also jumps into the water to try to save Simon, and we end up doing some, like, interesting, like, water fighting with these zombies. I'm like, okay, like, there's some interesting things that they try to do here. So we have them go on and, like, pop these zombies in the head as they kind of like kind of jump to the surface of the ocean or the whatever beach this place is. So they pop him in the head, they kill him off. So we have the guys all make their way back upon shore. Kirk, of course, is to have us find out that Kirk is to have like this like huge amount of like ammunition in all these boxes, and he's to have all these guns. And so we go on and we start to like armor people up. Casper ends up coming to the fray and is like, "Oh, hey, yeah, I guess Kurt, you had a bunch of illegal stuff after all." And Casper's like, "Well, there's something bigger going on here, so I'll let it slide." So everybody start to gun up, and everybody's like, "Okay, let's go on and let's get ready, because I think if we can't go back to the boat, let's just go back into that house. Like, let's try to just figure out a way to get back there." So once we get to the house and we get close to there, all of these zombies just come out of the woodwork, and we then have these cool like action sequences with like Liberty, who's kind of doing this matrix maneuver trying to dodge this zombie, doing a bunch of cool combating moves. And so we also had this one bridge where Rudy was to go on and like put a nail into his hand, and then like for the rest of the movie he has to just kind of like one hand with this gun, as well as this like zombie that comes like flying out of this bridge and starts attacking people. We also had Simon, who ends up getting this like acid to his face, and we're thinking the whole entire time, like, not only does like Kurt get like kind of bitten in the arm, but then Simon gets this like weird acid in the face, and both of them like don't transform into zombies the whole entire film. So I'm like, okay, like I guess we're just having them just be in poor health throughout this movie. But not only that, while they're doing these like circular 360 like around the character maneuvers as we're having all these action sequences unfolding here, getting closer and closer to this house, we go on and have these guys like gunning in front of this house because they can't get into the house because the door is locked. So we now have both Rudy and we have Casper that have to go to the side of the house to find out if there's like another way into the house. They find this window, and so it seems that certain characters are starting to run out of ammunition already, and Casper ends up being one of them. So Casper goes on and shoots her officer, her friend, and so by the time that Rudy ends up getting this window open and he pushes his way into it, by the time Casper tries to get into its window, she gets outnumbered by all these zombies with all these weapons all of a sudden, like these axes and all of this stuff, and she loses both of her legs. And when Rudy is to pull her through, Rudy pulls Casper through legless. And so Rudy now has to tell Casper, it's like, hey, you saved us, as she's dying. And I'm like, well, is she become a zombie? No? Alright. Casper was fun. That was a fun character, because of course, we also had a scene with her and Greg that were just running off in the woods somewhere. Like, I didn't understand what the whole point of that was. I guess to get the zombies to like kind of get away from like, but it like they were doing so many things in this movie. It was like the whole Greg and just Casper scene just kind of felt like, okay, like this seemed pointless, and it cost Greg his life. Greg died while he was getting swarmed by all these zombies and surrounded, and he got outnumbered and he ran out of bullets. So yeah, like there was nothing he could do. So, but now Casper is also dead. So Rudy then goes and unlocks the house for everybody to come in before they run out of bullets. We have Simon at one point stating that he was going to save the last round for himself. And I'm just like, okay, like I think you're probably going to need to go on and change that statement because at some point he does go out here. We also had in the camp uh, when everybody was make their way back to the camp to try and find Cynthia. Cynthia ends up going on to become a zombie. Casper ends up shooting her, and Hugh ends up getting his neck snapped, I think, by Cynthia. So I wanted to cover that. And so they try to run to the house because that's the only place they could find that would be able to get them to be able to fortify and be safe. Now that I've covered all of that, Liberty also dies. She ends up getting surrounded by zombies. She doesn't have enough combat skill, I guess, left in her body to eventually take these zombies down. So Rudy goes on and sees his life flash before his eyes with every single sequence that happens in this film. And Rudy ends up realizing that now Liberty's dead and there's nothing he can do. For some reason, Rudy was to really, I guess, be really interested in Liberty, but what good does that do? So everybody's back in the house now. And so come to find out, while we get Rudy, who's kind of putting everybody into the home, we end up having Kirk being last, as he was to try to put on a pretty good defense, and he ends up getting bitten in the leg. So they take Kirk into this room, and so there's 4 characters that end up like separating into groups of 2, so they can both have these moments of kissing and passionate making of sorts, with lovins and kissins, and because they're probably going to die soon, most of them. So at least 2 out of the 4, maybe more than that, to really just be mysterious about how this movie ends. So Kirk goes on and is to hear the whistling of his first mate, Salish. I effed up that name, I realize it. I'm clearing that up now. So Salish. So Kirk goes out to realize that his first mate is now a zombie, and so Kirk shoots him in the head. And so Rudy goes out there realizing that Kirk kind of went outside. You would have thought, like, Rudy would have been like, you kept the door open? Some zombies could have got in. So Kirk is going out there because if he's going to die anyways, he's going to go out with his boots on. So Rudy goes out there, is like, hey, Kirk, what are you doing? And Kirk is to go on and have this stick of dynamite and be like, hey, man, I'm going to go out killing off a lot of these zombies, so just kind of let me go out. So Kirk dies here and explodes and kills a bunch of zombies, even though what good does that do, because there's always more zombies. So they go on and they lock up the house yet again, and so now we have to go on and try to figure out within this place, like, hey, like, we need to scavenge, we need to find items, we need to try to figure out things. So the further and further they go into this house, they realize that there are so many secret rooms. There's a whole, like, laboratory room that they find all of this blood that I guess is to activate these things into becoming zombies. I guess it's all from this blood, oddly enough. So we have at points here where they end up having to go from having like a whole house that they can kind of walk around in to then having the zombies surround like this one door. So they end up getting sandwiched in between this one small room that has all this gunpowder and this laboratory room that also has zombies in it. And so, like, they were just throwing glass and throwing these jars and stuff at these zombies, which I thought was like, man, that's cool, because I'm like, somebody could get some freaking glass in their freaking face and whatever. Uh, but yeah, so we end up having Simon, who is kind of keeping these zombies at bay and letting these guys find this one like hidden door for them to go down into this kind of underground like room. So Simon ends up saying like, "Hey man, like I'll go on and like I'll fend off these zombies. You get out of here." So Simon ends up shooting into the gunpowder barrel, and he ends up like exploding and killing off whatever the zombies are on the like the upper part of this home here. As we have Rudy and we have Alicia and we have Karma who are going down into this underground location where Rudy just calls it a catacomb, where there might be a number of different tunnels that go on and lead them out to the beach and maybe possibly way out of here. So we have our characters continue on through these tunnels to find out that there is seemingly a number of zombies there. So they start to shoot them off, all having it seem that they have to showcase the game while they're doing so, if they haven't done that through a plethora of different scenes throughout this film. So we go further and further through this tunnel, and we have at one point where sadly Karma dies. As Karma is going on and holding off all these zombies, she's like, "Hey, I'm gonna hold them off, and you guys make it, because you're gonna be like there just has to be a dwindle down of numbers till there's like the fewest people that survive in a horror film." So I was to clearly make the consensus that by the end of the film, no one was going to survive this. Everyone was going to die. But clearly, I guess this movie had other thoughts. So we have Rudy and Alicia, who, oddly enough, are to see Greg. Greg, it seems, is to somehow be alive. He's weirdly wearing this cloak. He's not saying anything, weirdly enough. But it goes on and takes our characters to another laboratory, where all of a sudden we then find out that Greg is not actually Greg. Greg is to be Castillo. Stupid, goofy name. Why can't he have just been an easy thing to have said? Anyways, so he's the villain of the story. Now I have to go on and consistently butcher his name. So this villain is to go on and showcase his face, and he is to look at our characters, both Alicia and Rudy, and oddly enough, this guy is to go on and control these other zombies. And so he's stating that he's going to go on and use all of the pieces of these characters to have him be able to plenish himself so he can live longer. And so I'm like, okay, that's like an interesting idea that we can kind of play with here. So we turn around and have our characters go on and figure out how to get away from these zombies. And so they end up running off to make their way back to the front of this place. And so now we have this kind of weird sword fight between Castillo and Alicia, while kind of Rudy's kind of in and out of it. He ends up getting kind of knocked back. So Castillo ends up stabbing Alicia in the heart, and you would have thought, like, she's dead. Obviously, she's dead. But no! Weirdly enough, this girl gets stabbed right in, like, the middle section here, and she's still living throughout the rest of this film, oddly enough. And I was like, wait a minute, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how many times in any number of other things somebody would be dead. But no, not this girl, because she is unstoppable. So, oddly enough, they had to have a female, like, make it to the end of a horror film because it's a rule. So we have Rudy that goes on and axes off Castillo's head, and come to find out, the guy's still working it. He's still doing it. He's still living. And so we have like the head separate and the body is still choking Rudy. And so this gives us like that Alicia needs to go on and get back up and smush this head and then probably just fall back over because he's almost dead. So Rudy grabs Alicia and is like throwing Alicia over his shoulder, kind of thing, like kind of like throwing her arm over his shoulder to like, hey, let's kind of both like try to get you off to like some kind of help somewhere, because all of a sudden we just randomly have this helicopter that comes in, I guess because Casper had somehow made like a satellite phone call at some point at the early part of this thing, like stating like, hey, if I'm not back or if I haven't called you by this, like send like the feds in. So we all of a sudden have some Fed, I believe, named Rogan and another detective or another Fed named G, like as if this is like Men in Black or something. And they're going on like, hey, we need to have all these mutations contained and so on and so forth. So we go on to have Rudy, and here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. Because in IMDb, this guy is named Rudy, but his name is actually Rudolph. Uh, uh, Korean, some I don't know. It's some. His first name is Rudolph. Uh, and so I'm like, wait a minute. So like, I've been calling him Rudy the whole entire time, but his actual name is Rudolph. But because that's what the movie says at the end of it. But so, anyways, we have Rudy who says what his actual name is, whatever it really was. And I know it was Rudolph, the first name, but I don't remember what the second one was. And so both Rudy and Alicia just walk off to the sunset, or in this case, a helicopter to get the heck out of there. And so we have both Rudolph and we have both Alicia that live to fight another day. And so, with that said, that wraps up this movie, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to try to get the heck out of here. Let me know in the comments below if you went on and saw House of the Dead at some point. Maybe you went on and saw it when it was originally released, or you were to go on and see it now and said, man, this movie's awful. I don't know what pipe this guy was smoking out of. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to get out of here so I can go on and review another film. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.